Welcome back to Stories of UFC. We already discussed a lot about the Ngannou vs Jones fight, so I think I don't want to speak about this topic. But yesterday PFL shocks the MMA world. PFL officially acquired the Bellator organization. Actually, it's a big thing in the MMA world because Bellator was not a small organization. It was an old, well-established organization. It's like how UFC acquires Pride FC and make UFC the number one organization on the market. Until yesterday, there was no solid opponent for UFC. Don't say one championship as an opponent. Today, everything changed, man. PFL buys Bellator and announces a huge crossover fight update. In 2024, they are going to make the PFL champs vs Bellator champs fight. And recently, Ngannou said this on the Last Stand podcast. First of all, when I was around, Jon Jones wasn't around. Even 3 years before, we are negotiating. I was asking for this fight after I fought Cesaro Rosenstick. I was pushing so hard for Jon Jones because I know the UFC was going to make Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic 3, the trilogy of Stipe and DC. So I wanted the Jon Jones fight and they never brought that conversation up. They would use it to paint out the narrative for both sides. If it's about me, it's like, oh, I'm not doing the fight. If it's Jon Jones, so many times they have told me Jon Jones doesn't want to do that fight. I think we both were asking for it, acknowledging Jones. My reason it didn't happen because the UFC. The UFC is responsible for this fight not happening. I think that fight should happen and I have been asking for this fight. I think I can go back to PFL and talk about this and make this fight happen. Now it makes sense. Both guys genuinely won the fight. That's why Ngannou doesn't trash talk Jones. At the UFC 295 press conference, when reporters asked about the Ngannou vs Jones crossover, Dana shuts the question down. If you think from the UFC perspective, it seems okay. Because UFC was the number one organization and PFL was not well established like UFC. So that's why they aren't interested in this question. Now it's changed, man. PFL buys Bellator and they already have the big names like Francis Ngannou, Jake Paul. Yesterday PFL founder Don Davis announced the possible Francis Ngannou vs Deontay Wilder MMA fight in PFL in 2024. And Jake Paul calls Nate Diaz for a MMA fight in PFL or crossover next year. And it seems if the boxers want to fight in MMA, they probably go to PFL, not UFC. Tyson Fury frequently said he wanted to fight in MMA. Maybe he will join PFL in the future. I think the MMA crossover era was going to start next year. Now coming to Jon Jones, he said he only wants to fight big names like Francis Ngannou. And Jones also went as a guest to the PFL event. Now UFC has a solid opponent, which is PFL. If PFL makes the big event like Ngannou vs Wilder next year, possibly we will see the Ngannou vs Jones crossover fight at the end of the next year. Because Ngannou vs Wilder fight will not only attract MMA fans, it will attract the old boxing fans. After the massive impact, UFC needs to change its mind. They need to be ready for the crossover fight because the sport was evolving. If they didn't adopt, they would eventually disappear at some point. They know that. Yeah, that's the thing. We are going to see the Jon Jones vs Francis Ngannou fight next year. Okay, let me know what do you guys think about the UFC vs PFL crossover fight. Would this even start happening next year? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section and help me to get 1000 subscribers as soon as possible. Yeah, that's it for today. I will see you guys tomorrow.